Our Constitution. It's what makes our country the freest in the world. Our country was the first experiment with a democratic government, a government created for its citizens and where its citizens have a voice. Now, other countries have constitutions modeled after ours, but no democracy has ever been as successful as ours. None have given their citizens as much personal freedom as ours. What about Europe, you ask? They seem to have the same freedoms we do, at least for the most part, but according to British journalist Christopher Booker, not so much. He spoke at a lecture in the UK for the Institute of Directors. His topic, Europe and Regulation, the New Totalitarianism. His main point? That the nations within the European Union were no longer truly democratic, as they are now living under an undemocratic EU government that does not respond to the input of the average citizen. He cited examples that included a flood of new excessively oppressive regulations from appointed members of the EU, UK citizens requesting personal intervention from these regulations from their British MP. They were getting as their only response letters from the same EU bureaucrat who created the problem. Unelected bureaucrats were not only issuing regulations without responding to criticism, but also without political pressure from locally elected MPs. Booker stated, quote, "The illusion is still given us that our democratically elected politicians are still somehow in charge, able to make decisions on our behalf. And he said, it is no longer the elected politicians who are even nominally in control. It is not even those shadowy armies of officials who behind the scenes at least go through the motions of formulating those decisions. What is in control is the system itself, and with rapidly accelerating momentum in the past few years, it has been turning into a very odd system indeed." Grant Jeffrey noted in his book Surveillance Society that the European Union is little more than a showpiece, debating society. Why? They do not have the political power to choose executives, make specific laws, or alter taxation. These are powers granted to 21 appointed members of the EU Executive Commission. In the United States, we can hardly imagine a system where we could not write our congressmen about a bill they want to pass, or sign a petition for a grievance, or vote for our governors or our president. Taxation without representation is quite unappealing as well. Remember learning about the Boston Tea Party? We didn't like it back then either. So what makes our Constitution so special? It's our founders' vision. Our country's founding fathers understood an oppressive government, having lived under one, and fought a war to be free of it. They wanted a new kind of government that would prevent any one person from having too much power without being accountable. Also, each state had unique fears of how a federal government would infringe on their laws and freedoms as a state.
Mr. Sherman.
Gentlemen, we strongly oppose the suggestion that the House of Representatives be elected by the people. The people should have as little to do as possible with the government. We strongly urge that the House of Representatives be elected by the state legislature.
Mr. Gary?
We strongly agree with the gentleman. The evils we experience today flow from the excesses of democracy.
Mr. Mason?
Ah, yes. Well, my distinguished fellows, we must respectfully disagree with the honorable gentleman. The election of the larger branch must be by the people. It will become the grand depository of the democratic principle of the government.
Edison?
Gentlemen, I consider the popular election of one branch of our national legislature as essential to every plan of free government.
And Mr. Rutledge?
I'm strongly in favor of vesting the executive power in a single person, though I'm not in favor of giving him the power of war and peace.
No! No! Yes! Yes! No! Yes! Yes! No! Yes!
Mr. Randolph?
A single executive would be the fetus to a monarchy. We have no motive to be governed by the British monarchy as our prototype.
Mr. Wilson?
Instead of being the fetus of a monarchy, sir, a single executive would be the best safeguard against tyranny.
They can't seem to agree on anything.
I think we're in big trouble, sir.
What does it all mean, Linus? If they can't work out a compromise, the whole convention may fail.
Eventually, everyone's issues were resolved, and our Constitution became the law of the land. It provided for each state's right to govern itself, as well as provide a federal government that would unite the states, resolve issues between the states, and defend them. Our government is divided into three branches. These are, of course, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. The federal government is only supposed to have a limited amount of power, allowing the majority of the power to the individual states, where citizens have the most control. The 10th Amendment declares the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So what are the powers prohibited from the states? Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution imposes some limits on states. For example, a state cannot negotiate, sign treaties with, or declare war on a foreign government. Can you imagine if California declared war on Japan? I see problems happening here. Also, a state government cannot control their own money or set its value, or tax international imports and exports, and so on. Once government gains power, it is nearly impossible to remove that power. The federal government was created to have limited power, keeping most of the power with the states. Citizens have the most power to influence and change the government in their own states. The only voice the people have in our federal government is through our elected legislatures in the House and the Senate. Each state has its own constitution and laws. Also, an executive, legislative, and judicial branch of government runs each state. State constitutions can be amended just like a federal constitution. This can be done if it passes the state legislature by a supermajority, which is 2/3 or 3/4 majority vote. Then a referendum, where the people must also approve the amendment by a majority vote, thus giving the citizens the last word. State legislature is made up of a House and Senate and has responsibilities similar to that of the federal legislature when it comes to passing budgets, enacting laws, confirming nominations, and so on. However, did you know that citizens also wield legislative powers in state government? Although this power varies by state, usually citizens can pass a petition to have their issue put up for a general vote. In 14 states, citizens can actually remove an elected official from office through a recall. In the same way, the president is the chief executive in the executive branch of the United States federal government. The governor is the chief executive of a state government. Governors can serve either 2 or 4-year terms depending on the state. The governor has many tasks that are similar to that of the president. Look at this comparison of governors and legislators.
Well, executive decisions, clearly governors. I mean, they pass budgets, they veto bills, they make appointments, and they also make trade agreements. I mean, there are some respects of the job that deal with foreign countries.
Right. So here you've got a governor versus senator. Governor of state is actually the commander-in-chief, enforces the law, appoints judges, vetoes bills, passes budgets, and then a senator writes legislation, watchdog of the executive branch, confirms nominations by the president, overrides vetoes, empowered to try.
Which one looks more like a president? I mean, clearly. And I think historically, people have chosen governors to be presidents. It's worked out that way over the last 100 years.
In the federal government, only 2 members of the executive branch are elected, the president and the vice president. And these are not elected directly by the citizens, but rather the Electoral College. However, in state government, the people have much more control because they can also elect the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general, the auditor, the treasurer, the superintendent, and so on and so forth. It is the state's role to provide for needs such as transportation and education. It is the state that is supposed to be in control of the day-to-day matters that directly affect you. And it is in the state that your voice matters the most. In national elections, your senators and representatives for Congress are elected by a popular vote. These people represent either your state or district. To make your voice heard in the federal government, you must appeal to your elected congressional representatives. Have you ever wondered how the media can call an election hours before the votes are tallied? This is because the popular vote does not matter in regards to the presidential election. Only Electoral College votes. If this confuses you, you're not alone. After all, if the Electoral College chooses the president, why do we vote? The Electoral College really isn't as complicated as it's sometimes made out to be. The Electoral College guarantees that each state will have a say in whom our president will be. Simply put, the people don't vote for the president. The states vote for the president. The people's vote decides which candidate their state will vote for. The state's members of the Electoral College, called electors, are who cast the state's votes. If you look at the electoral map, you'll notice that some states have many electoral votes, like California, for instance, which has 55, and some states have few, like North Dakota or Alaska, which have only 3. The framers decided that in order for the people to have fair representation, the number of electoral votes in a state should be based on the population of that state. They did this by giving each state 1 elector for each of its members in the U.S. House of Representatives, which is based on population, plus 1 for each of its 2 U.S. senators. These electors are pledged, if you will, to vote for whomever their state votes for. So if you live in Ohio, your state has 20 electors. If a Democrat wins the Ohio election, all 20 of Ohio's votes should go to the Democratic candidate. But nothing in our Constitution forces this. In few rare cases, an elector has voted against the pledged candidate, but it is rare and has yet to affect the outcome of the race. Even so, several states have enacted laws to prevent this from happening. Only in extremely close elections is it possible that a candidate will win a popular vote and lose the electoral vote. But again, this is rare and has only happened 3 times in our nation's history.